Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your fave Blessing and we are back at it again with another video. So today's video is going to be about my second college interview. So without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright guys, as you guys can tell by the title, this is about my college interview with Princeton. And before I even get into the story time guys, like me, Blessing, had an interview with Princeton, like the Princeton University. I'm still in shock. I'm still amazed. Like, I can't even believe it, really, guys. Like, I can't. So, yeah. And before I even get into story time again, let me tell you guys the constraints behind this interview. This interview was only 30 minutes, so I couldn't go over or less. And it was at 8:30 in the morning. It was the first interview of the day. So, yeah. And I actually ended up getting into the Zoom lobby, like, 10 minutes before. And when I entered in the interview, again, this could be subjective to anybody who's taking a Princeton interview or anybody taking an interview in general, but for me, when I logged in, I was put in a lobby with 2 other people and they were also a part of the Princeton committee. And when I got on, they just talked to me. They were like, "Hi, how are you doing?" Just asked me like general questions. It was the morning time, so it wasn't nothing like extravagant or anything. And they were just like, your interview will start at 8:30 and then we'll push you into the room with your interviewer. And this time I actually did not know who my interviewer was beforehand, so I really did walk into this one really blind as far as like who I was going to talk to. But anyways, when I got into the room with my interviewer, mind you guys, it was morning, so you know, he was just drinking his coffee real quick and we were just like kind of like sitting there for a bit, just like 5 seconds. And then he finally put down his cup and then he was just like, "Hello, good morning." And then I said good morning, you know, the vibes. And then he actually started off by telling me about himself in the beginning, and he went ahead and just told me about like all the schools he's went to because he was a physician, his family life, and then he went ahead and just gave me a little bit of background about his experience at Princeton. So that's how it really started. He started off by really going in depth about himself, which I was actually quite surprised about that, because usually interviewers kind of slip that in during in the middle or like towards the end. But the interviewer was 30 minutes, so I feel like you have to get a lot done in a short time. So when we went ahead and after he introduced himself and gave a little bit of information, he went ahead and asked me the first question, which is, "Who are you? Tell me a bit about yourself." And after that was done, he kind of went ahead and like picked from what I said and kind of drove the question. And I feel like the next question had to do specifically about my family. And he asked about my parents' backgrounds, like their specific countries. And one thing that I did enjoy, and this is just like kind of off topic, but he did know exactly like where my mom's country was, and some people don't know that. So it was kind of interesting that he knew where she was from and was kind of able to tell me a bit about it from his point of view. So that was kind of interesting. So after that, he went ahead and started asking his next question. Now, my Princeton interview was different in the sense that it was more question answer, and that is due to the fact that it is a set time of 30 minutes. Now, if you have a longer interview, you will probably have more questions and you could probably push for a more conversational dialogue. My interview was had a dialogue, but in the beginning it was more of like 2-sentence dialogues or like a little bit of an explanation then move on, rather than like let's spend a good 10 minutes on this topic as it was for my past interview, which was very different for me, and it was not as nerve-wracking as I was expecting it to be, but it definitely was a different vibe. So if you are having a Princeton interview as your second or your first, it will definitely be different than your future ones or your past interview. What he did specifically was like anything that I said, he would go ahead and tell a little bit about his experience in that field. So after I went ahead and told him about my family for my first question, he told me about his family. And then after I told him about my academics, weaknesses, and strengths, he told me about his as well. So it was very much so like give or take, but it was still kind of question answer, but also conversational. I don't know if that makes sense, but like, yeah. So yeah. So he went ahead and he did that, and then after that he went on to his next questions, which were just basically about extracurriculars, and those were all the questions he asked me, because after that the conversation turned into a more in-depth conversation about goals and extracurriculars meshed. So after he asked my clubs, I said about the clubs I've been in, and then he went ahead and started talking about his clubs as he was doing in his pattern over the interview. But once he got into his clubs, like, he just kept talking a bit, and that personally scared me as the interviewee, because I didn't get a lot of time to talk about myself, and it was a short time period. But after having feedback from other friends, it seems like that probably wouldn't have been so bad. He probably felt comfortable, and I'm still a little bit like, I don't know, because I'm so used to like having that opportunity to talk about myself, but he kind of talked about himself. But I still stayed engaged, so I think that still kind of helped me. So at that point, after he asked like those 4 or 5 questions, it was more or less him talking about his experiences in clubs and his experiences at Princeton and in life in general. And then I would kind of put my input in overall. Like, I would just be like, yeah, I agree with this statement. I kind of tried to bring it back a couple times, but it was more or less like me like giving like a agreement or kind of saying something that he would continue. And that is literally how the remainder of the time, so I want to say that lasted for about 10-15 minutes out of the 30. So yeah, I'll say even half was more like question and answer, and then the second half was more of him talking and me putting in like small comments here and there. And that is overwhelming. If you're hearing this and you're just like, what? And that's kind of like scary. That is, I'm not even gonna lie to you, because the whole time in my head I was thinking like can I just like stop him to talk about myself? Because I mean, I've always been under the impression that an interview was about yourself, so that is nerve-wracking. But I mean, that's what happened in my interview. So he was a nice guy, don't get me wrong, and I do feel like the conversation was very well said, and I do feel like the conversation mattered. But as a person who's under the impression that an interview is about the interviewee and maybe more than like 4 smaller questions, that was a little bit nerve-wracking in my Princeton interview. But I still think I had a good interview. Even when I asked him for feedback, he did give me great feedback, and he said literally that I was great. He enjoyed the conversation, he enjoyed how engaged I was, and did wish me good luck. So I don't think it was a bad interview at all, but it was definitely not what I was expecting from an interview or even a Princeton interview. But that was really how the thing went. I don't really have anything major to say about it, just because it was 30 minutes. But one thing I would say is, with your Princeton interview, for sure, if you do happen to get an interviewer that is like more talkative than you would have been like imagined, I would continue to stay engaged. And I think that is probably one of the things that is gonna like help me, is that I stayed engaged. The only other thing that I would say about my interviewer, he was very kind. He did stutter a couple of times, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with stuttering, but that kind of made me nervous too. And one thing I would say is, make sure that if like your interviewer is the one that's nervous, make sure you don't pay too much attention to it and don't really show your nerves, because I feel like if I would have showed my nerves, it kind of would have been like a mess for both of us. So that's really how I feel about that bit. But the interview as a whole was all right. Like, I would rate that interview, like, to be fair, I would rate that interview a good like 8.5. The conversations were good, and he was really nice. He was so calm, and like he was giving me a lot of feedback. He gave me like a lot of help and like tips, and told me a lot about like how to build connections. He was very strong on like building my connections within Princeton rather than even just his experience. Like, I think his experience was mostly filled with connection building. So that was a really nice touch. I do think the Princeton interviews are versatile, because I've heard different like adaptions of interviews, and they're very all different. And I think interviews for Princeton specifically are very close to the interviewer. I think rather than it being like a basic guided interview, the Princeton interviews are definitely more driven by the desires of interviewers. Now, this is from me and like 3 other people that I know specifically, and it's very more of the direction the interviewer wants to go. And then once they kind of see you kind of do drive it as far as like if you want to move the conversation. But do know, like, the Princeton interviews, some of them will be more conversational and some of them will be more question and answer, if I can just say, like, in general. And this is not just from my experience, this is from like 3 other experiences. But that was really it. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, but I don't think I'm missing anything as far as the interview goes. It was literally that simple. It was that short. And I would say that I did learn a lot about Princeton. So anybody who's watching this and you are having your Princeton interview, I will say good luck to you. And I say just see how the momentum is, especially if you have a 30-minute one. Don't be too nervous. You can still get a lot done in 30 minutes. So yeah, before I finish this video, I just want you guys to remember, if you get asked to do an interview, please, please, please make sure you accept. Even if you don't want to go to that school, this will be a good opportunity for you to get exposure to how an interview is. So without further ado, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share, tell your whole family, your cousins, your aunties, your uncles. And yeah, thank you. Good luck to the class of 2025 and beyond. And I hope you guys do good on your interviews. So yeah, thank you. Bye.